Hey, good afternoon. Greg White is back. Greg White, Scott Luton with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, on the
Yes,
heels of your big wild adventures, great to have you back in the studio.
it is lovely to be back, frankly. Yes, it was a great, what was it, 5 days? Listened to an entire podcast series in the Red Clay, by the way. If you have not listened to that, Jason Hoke and Imperative Entertainment. It's a dramatic one. It's not like, it's not this case, then that case, then another case. That was great. And then, of course, Savannah spent two and a half days in Savannah and 2.5 days in Charleston. From a food, architecture, walkability, beach standpoint, I'm not sure where else you could be except those two cities and have all of the greatness of all those things. And we're about to find out whose favorite city Savannah is. I'm not giving it up yet.
Well, great to have you back. Look forward to hearing a lot more about your adventures. You're able to pull off a live stream last week, which we're going to touch on briefly.
Barely.
That's right. Well, folks, but you, as Greg alluded to, you're in for a treat today, as we have got Lora Cecere with us in the house, her making her monthly appearance, and we're going to be talking about how not to buy supply chain planning. We're going to be talking about the Ever Given and that continued fallout and a lot more. So stay tuned. She joined us about 12:15, 12:20. But in the meantime, Greg, we got to give our friends over at OpenText a shout out. They are powering today's supply chain buzz, the information company, as their tagline suggests.
Yeah.
So big event coming up with Mark Morley and the gang on June 22nd. Are you all buckled up and ready to go?
I am ready. I've bought my suit and tie, but I'll be there. Yeah. Well, it's funny because we're going to talk about something where a lot of what OpenText does, connecting technologies internally and externally, would come in really, really handy. Frankly, would have come in handy for this company over a decade ago. But yeah, I mean, I think that, look, the supply chain it requires connection. If we haven't realized that yet, please let me reiterate that to you. It requires connection between your technologies, between your companies, all of your trading partners. And that's really what these guys do. Is they started off as EDI VAR, right? And have added all kinds of integration technologies and now some operational technologies too. So.
Well, stay tuned for more details around that June 22nd event. A lot of folks have logged in, and we're going to give some shout outs here momentarily. Welcome, everybody. You have a great episode teed up. Let's make a few housekeeping details. First off, it's important to note that the buzz comes to you every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time. We pair that with a Thursday live stream at 12 noon Eastern time, which is kind of our Baskin Robbins live stream. Sometimes it'll be about tequila sunrise and the leading tech development. Sometimes it'll be about like this Thursday. It's supply chain leadership in Africa with our friends at Sapix and, of course, Jenny Froome. But every week, Monday and Thursday, without fail, 12 noon Eastern time, join us for a lively discussion and bring your voice. So, quick programming notes on the main channel today. If you subscribe to Supply Chain Now, you saw our latest Digital Transformers episode hit, where we had Gary Storr and April Harrison talking supplier management and blockchain, Greg. We can't get enough blockchain around here, huh?
No, we can't. And I saw some places where some people were chained 2 blocks. No. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And, again, we're going to talk about a big technology move that happened Thursday last week today. And it's a critical component for supply chain, this.
Agreed. And then on This Week in Business History, we had a guest host sit in. Nick Rumer with CBUS 21 sat in and guest hosted for us. And he talked about real sustainability action, leadership in action, and the history of the COP, the Conference of Parties. So check that out, This Week in Business History, wherever you get your podcast from. And let's see, we touched on the live stream that somehow Greg pulled off last Thursday. Don't know how he did it, but
I'm pretty sure I was in a house that was built in like 1786, and I'm pretty sure the router was from then as well.
Well, nevertheless, We pulled it off, had a great conversation with XPO and, of course, our friends at US Bank. And we tackled their freight payment index that's released every quarter. So you can learn more about that. Critical freight insights and data at freight.usbank.com. Okay, finally, webinar tomorrow. I love this topic. Setting the standard for supply chain security and how the ICT industry is poised to protect our global supply chain. So look for Kevin L. Jackson leading this webinar with our friends at the Telecommunications Industry Association. All right. So Greg, all of that, we're going to say hello to a few folks first, and then we're going to dive in and get your take on some of the biggest news last week. So first off, let's see. Alay is back with us from Sudan. Alay, great to have you here via Facebook. Look forward to hearing your comments, perspectives. Sharnivas is back with us via LinkedIn. And Bob, hey, Bob, how you doing? Hope this finds you well. I think I saw a new position that you took on here recently, so congratulations there. Tom Raftery, hello from Sevilla in Spain. Tom, great to see you here. Kavan, the PhD, the doctor of supply chain, kind of like the supply chain doctor.
Yeah.
Kavan, hope this finds you well. Jasmine, maybe. Happy Monday from Denver. I wonder, Greg, how cold do you think it is in Denver?
Hey, Siri. Oh, I don't know. Denver is a strange city. So, that whole section of the country, you could get a foot of snow and the next day it's 70 degrees. In a way, it's kind of a fun crapshoot.
Really?
Yeah.
And of course, the Broncos, who are the tortured rivals of the world champion Kansas City Chiefs, right?
Not tortured enough. Yes.
Daria Patel is with us. Daria, it was a pleasure to sit down with you a week or two ago. Look forward to releasing a podcast featuring your POV shortly. I hope this finds you well there in India. Sylvia, you were in Sylvia's City.
I'm in trouble. Read on down the list. Sylvia, I am so sorry. Yes, I am so sorry. It was such a whirlwind there and the weather, Sylvia, you have to confess, one day was not great. So I cannot believe I did not go pick up some jam. I'm so sorry. We'll be back soon. I'll be back soon for sure. I loved it.
Yes, Aaron, Greg is in lots of trouble. And welcome,
as always,
to the podcast. Peter Bollet is with us. Made it good Monday morning. He of the latest contracting project. We're getting updates from Peter, and that kitchen is coming right along. Yeah,
it looks great.
Simon, the newly engaged Simon, meaning he found his last or his latest position, I think, last week. So congrats personally to you, Simon, and great to have you here as part of the live stream.
And he's going to get to work with some folks that I know really well. Martin Gomez, who is a brilliant supply chain mind and one of the most educated people ever on wine.
Wow. Okay. So Simon, congrats. Mervin is back with us. Mervin, great to have you here. I had no comments on the hair, Mervin, today. We had a lot of good fun with Mervin on the last live stream. T-Squared is with us. Supply chain is a communicator space and place. Excellent. Now here on a serious note, and Daria, I appreciate that the situation is grim. If you've been reading the news and watching the news, really tough situation, as Daria says. The situation's grim in India. Hopefully the peak will pass in mid-May and we will sail through. Currently confined to indoors only. So, Daria, all the best. I recall early, Greg, if you remember, probably about a year or so ago, we had some folks from Italy, tuned in, and where it was really ravaging earlier in 2020. And, India right now is going through something as tragic. And, hopefully I like Daria's optimism, see it through and break out to the other side and enjoy in-person company soon. So, welcome everybody. We've got an outstanding conversation teed up here today. Okay. So Greg, before we bring in Lora Cecere, because we're going to get her thoughts on this same big blockbuster news, that is, as reported by Supply Chain Dive, Panasonic is acquiring Blue Yonder in a $7.1 billion deal. So Panasonic, as we all know, had taken a 20% stake in Blue Yonder in July 2020. With this new deal, the press release states, quote, "This acquisition brings the strategic relationship full circle," end quote. Now, Greg, I've got my popcorn, my world-class popcorn, my Diet Coke, and my Junior Mints all ready just to sit back and see what you're going to say. What's your take on this deal?
You know, it makes me feel like, since you said that, this is a reference most people won't get, but a movie review, should I give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right? So let me just give you my thoughts here. One, and Corinne Bursa has repeated this frequently. Back in the beginning of March, there was a leak that something might be happening, and both companies, both Blue Yonder and Panasonic, were quick, very quick, as if they had prepared statements to refute the claim that something was happening in terms of Panasonic buying the 80% of the company that it didn't already own. My speculation, pure speculation, is that they were trying to start a bidding war for JDA. The bidding war didn't happen. They see some synergies with their automated technologies, some of their robotic technologies, and the planning and AI capabilities that JDA's product has, and so they went ahead and bought them out. So the valuation of JDA is about $8.5 billion. 5.6 billion of that, of the balance, so they had to pay 7.1 to get to that. 5.6 billion of that bought the 80% of shares that Panasonic did not already own. And this is the number that is the stunner to me. $1.5 billion went to removing or alleviating the debt that Blue Yonder had to that point. I'd love to quote Lora from the pre-show, but I want her to say the words that she said. But basically, it was just to tease it a little bit, it was burdensome amount of debt for a company. And JDA had acquired a lot of that debt when they bought Red Prairie, and then and then the combined JDA and Blue Yonder joined up together. I think everybody, well, not everybody, lots of people know what my reaction to the name was, but I get why they did it. All of this is kind of a progression from being an old, staid, static, on-premise software technology company to a new AI-driven SaaS cloud annually recurring revenue company. And to do that, to really make that hit home, they had to adopt the new name of Blue Yonder. You know, the numbers that are put out there, I defy anyone without a finance degree to figure out what this company's revenue is, to figure out what their growth is. And suffice it to say, I am suspicious. I don't know if suspicious is the right word, but whatever. I'm dubious of what these numbers represent when so many numbers are put out there and they're hard to discern. They have 3 or 4 categorizations of what they call SaaS revenue. One is appears to be actual annually recurring revenue, which means you don't have to resell it every year. They've got another classification of SaaS revenue that looks to be services, like implementation services, and subscriptions, which is the new age way of calling software maintenance, things like that. It's really, really curious the way that they describe their revenue, and this has been a pattern for JDA in the last 5-10 years in terms of classifying and obfuscating their numbers. So it's really confusing to me. I'm not sure what to make of it. I would rather have Lora tell us what to make of it, but I don't see a transformational combination here. I don't see an accelerant, right? I don't see us pouring fuel on a small burning flame and creating a big fire here. I just don't see it. But you know, anything could happen.
Anything is possible. As
it's really big news,
philosopher.
Scott, and I wish I could say that I really see it turning into something great. What I see is a private equity move to get these private equity firms their money and get it moved to somebody who believes that they can make it into something really, really big. It's as simple as that.
Well, I appreciate your take. We are going to get Laura's take here momentarily. We're going to say hello to a few more folks. And then we're going to swoosh in Laura. So Joe O'Connor is with us here today via LinkedIn from Cincinnati, home of the Reds, which last I checked, they had a decent start to the season, baseball season. I'm not sure if that's the case. Joe, fill us in. We're crying our beer here with the Atlanta Braves here lately, at least.
Did they lose the second of the doubleheader yesterday? I was driving.
They got no hit in 7 innings, because of shortened game on doubleheaders. No hit by Madison Bumgarner. And I'll tell you, as I was listening to the radio call, the beginning of the game, the Braves got down in the second game, 5-0, maybe 6-0 in the first inning. And one of the announcers said, well, in paraphrase, fortunately, this is Madison Bumgarner not in his prime, on the tail end of his career. And then he goes out and of course he jinxes. Exactly. So Madison still has plenty of gas in the tank. But Chris Barnes, yes, we're going to have to get you and Kevon connected because we've got 2 supply chain doctors. But as Chris says, there's only one supply chain doctor. That's his tagline there. Fred Tolbert, it's a great day to be in supply chain. Fred, it is. Appreciate what you do with our young supply chain practitioners matriculating through school. Or are you going to say, Greg?
Doc Holiday of supply chain, right?
Yes. Let's see here. Azalea, LinkedIn did not want to play for me today. Interesting, for weeks now, for going back 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. A lot of feedback around LinkedIn's platform. So that notifications and you name it. So we'll work through it together. And then I was going to share one more. So Simon, I chose the wrong word. He says newly engaged, yes, but 31 years married tomorrow. Which
way to go, Scott. Always serving the community. You reminded, don't wait to buy flowers till tomorrow, Simon.
That's right. Let's see here. Natalie says the Reds always have a good season right up to the All-Star break.
That is a true Reds fan right there. They know it.
Tom says no hit. Doubleheader. What are these new supply chain terms I've not come across before? Hey, we're supply chain nerds that really like sports too. So Tom,
we already talked about the no hit just at the beginning of the segment.
That's right. About a big deal last week.
Well, that should make Tom happy because they will not be a stronger competitor for SAP.
So on that note, we heard Greg's take. I love hearing Greg's take each Monday and oftentimes on Thursdays on all the latest developments across supply chain. But today we've got an outstanding guest to accompany Mr. Greg White. It's Lora Cecere. Let's swoosh her in, founder of Supply Chain Insights and author of the very popular blog, Supply Chain Shaman.
How does it feel to be swished, right?
Right.
Well, it sounds like to me, we want to swish some of these deals down the pipes from what I'm hearing. And we'll get your take here in just a moment, Laura. But we want to start, not necessarily with a lightning round, but, Laura, there is a day for anything on the planet. There's a day for it, right? And if it's not here in the U.S., there's one across the world. My father-in-law is in the moonshine business, and there's a National Moonshine Day in June. We're going to have them talking about moonshine supply chain. But today is National Audubon Day, and I got to tell you, Laura and Greg, I wasn't familiar. I was familiar, like most people, with the Audubon Society, but today celebrates the birthday each year of John James Audubon. Birds of America, I think, is a famous book that he wrote. So this nonprofit that bears his name, the National Audubon Society, protects birds and their habitats. And we're huge bird lovers here. Laura, are you a big bird fan?
I am. I have 62 bluebird boxes on my fence.
Wow.
I had no idea. Man, we're going to have to compare notes.
We need a video of that.
Yeah.
So far, none of them have landed to make them their home. And, I also have, a purple martin house. Purple martins are fascinating birds.
Wow.
Man, okay.
Okay. Talk about multifaceted. I had no idea, Laura.
Well, all right. So we are going to have to talk birds. I was just
kidding.
looking up our house finches. I've got a feeder right here, and I'm still a novice in trying to, other than like the blue jay, you know, and cardinals, I'm trying to identify these species. So we'll talk more about that. But speaking of habitats and, you know, national parks, you know, Laura, what's your favorite national park that you enjoy?
So I love Zion. I've spent many of a day in Zion, just, you know, tranquil, beautiful. I like Yosemite, but it's been very, very damaged by tourists. And I like Bryce. One of my favorite parks, which is sort of sad because it's really being overused, is Torrey Pines, which is right outside of San Diego. It's a beautiful park.
I love the imagery you paint, and I didn't realize Zion was Utah's first national park. So we hope to get out there at some point soon. All right, so Laura, before we tackle a couple different things that pieces that you have composed here recently, let's talk about Panasonic and Blue Yonder. So I really enjoyed you and Greg's pre-show chat. I love hearing Greg's take because y'all two both tell it like it is, and I love that about you both. I'm way too diplomatic. So, but Laura, what's your take on what the news that came out last week?
Well, I think it's good news for Blue Yonder's investors who really just needed to turn the money. It's horrible news for the manufacturers that own Blue Yonder software. It's good news for Blue Yonder's competitors, OMP, Kinaxis, 09, Blue Ridge. Greg used to be part of Blue Ridge, SaaS in the retail space. But, you know, it's really sad because I used to work for a company called Manigistics, was part of the JDA roll-up that went to Blue Yonder. And it's just sad for me to watch kind of the dilution of thought leadership and how far behind they have become with, you know, the state of the art and planning. And in fact, that whole roll-up has been really driven by using maintenance revenue to fuel, you know, investors' pockets.
Well, you know, you also added one more thing pre-show, where I think you added you look at these deals through the customer's eyes, and I love that. Elaborate a little bit more on that, Laura.
Yeah, so the customer never wins when investors are rolling their money. And I write for line of business users, and so when I read this, I'm like, okay, so who's winning and what's my advice for line of business users? And, you know, Blue Yonder was just a name change. Not a lot happened in terms of advancement of the engines or the software. And so when I think about it, I think those that are in manufacturing should start to look for really the next generation of planning software. And those in retail are probably okay because retail was later to develop, but they've got to be careful about the maintenance revenue and the user groups. And never in the history of supply chain planning have we had a successful company that came from either a sensor or technology type of company. And here we're dealing with, you know, sensors and, you know, hardware or consulting. So anytime I read that a hardware vendor or a consultant is out, you know, driving software, I'm like, it's the kiss of death. And often supply chain planning software doesn't fail right away. It's sort of like it circles the drain in a dirty bathtub, right? And so, you know, it's around for a long time.
The visuals continue, Greg. Hey, let's go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, you know, it's funny because I had not thought about some of those elements of the accumulation that became JDA, right? I mean, I worked for a company called E3 that was acquired.
Correct.
September 10th, 2001. Not great timing. And by JDA, and that product was ancient when they bought it.
Right.
They bought a technology called Arthur, which in its day was, I mean, it was top of the line for retail, but it was still a glorified spreadsheet. And I haven't seen that they have done much to evolve those technologies. I got to say, Laura, you know, there are a lot of companies that acquire these companies and live off of the maintenance revenue. They don't even attempt to sell these products. At least JDA attempted to sell these products. And I think, by the way, that influenced Infor, who was kind of going the direction of just acquiring old technologies and living off the maintenance revenue. They've actually started to develop and to sell those technologies into the marketplace. But you're right, it has largely been for laggards, and they have been well behind the curve in terms of advanced technologies. We were talking about AI, which is solely the domain of Blue Yonder, despite reports that are Blue Yonder pre-JDA, despite the report that the combined company has over 100 data scientists on staff right now. That's one report. But I think you're right. It's important to recognize that, and this is a statement I've made frequently, Laura, that is, you are the disruptor, or you are to be disrupted. You cannot be both. And JDA, Blue Yonder, Panasonic, whatever you want to call it, they will not be the disruptor of the industry. And if you're looking for real innovation, real change, real advancement in terms of technology, you're right. You need to look elsewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, I just think back to the demise of Vocalect, right? When a hardware company bought them, right? And you know, if we look at any supply chain planning purchase by a hardware company or consulting company, it is the vote of death. And consolidation strategies are sort of like sucking maintenance revenue, right? And putting it in the pocket of the investors, right? And so I often write, once that money starts to turn, many times for the investors, it's time to get out for a line of business buyer.
So we're going to talk a lot more about how not to buy supply chain planning software in just a second. I want to say hello to a few folks that are commenting on what they're hearing here. Let's see here. Sylvia, wrong Audubon. But hey, that Audubon sounds really cool too.
Audubon.
Azalea, did anyone else instantly smile when Laura was smooshed in? We got a new phrase here. Lots of smiling and laughter. Absolutely, Azalea. And she also enjoys, I guess folks in West Virginia enjoy that mountain moonshine. Mohib is with us in Wichita, the air capital of the world. Great to have you here. And I think this is Nanda. And Nanda, talking batteries and new battery technologies. Hey, we will make that a topic soon and dive into a ton of really cool stuff. In fact, just over the weekend, I bought a new blower that's powered by lithium ion battery that I wouldn't have ever gotten 5 years ago. That thing works like a charm. I blew away 2 of my 3 kids with that blower. Let's see here. Bob Bova, speaking back to this deal, Panasonic wants to evolve from a hardware company to a software provider and a SaaS implementer.
So that's precisely the problem that Laura is describing, is that the foundational elements of the business of implementer or consulting or services and hardware, they are so foundationally different from technology, software. Just using the term software is problematic these days, right? But they're so foundationally different that it's a bridge too far, truthfully.
Yeah, you've really got to understand the software model. You've got to understand what drives your customers, how do you do evolution, and how do you do that next generation of technology. You know, Blue Yonder never figured out how to move from that consolidation of great assets, they didn't retain talent very well, to that next evolution of technology, which is really driving the explosive growth of 09. And a lot of those, you know, I2 companies and clients, you know, have followed 09, right?
So a few of the comments here. Chris Barnes says the Blue Yonder acquisition is the sign of the times. Supply chain planning is old school. New school is supply chain networks. Bob?
I wish, because Chris, I have a lot of heart for that statement, but I do not find that to be the case. I operate a share group called the Network of Networks, where we're talking about networks, and blockchain's not scalable, and people are not investing in networks, so we don't have authoritative identifiers. People don't know what to do, and a lot of people are investing in the old EDI networks, and so the whole conversation around networks is one that you could get me wound up like a top, and we just cannot get people to put their money where their mouth is. We talk networks, but building them is something else.
Agreed.
That's stunning to me in this day and age, with what we've, especially the pressure that we've recently seen on the supply chain. I mean, first of all, I applaud Chris for thinking that way. Chris is tightly wound with APIX and ASCM, and just to be thinking that far forward when so heavily influenced by ASCM that's a huge breakout. But it is true. We do often talk about all these advanced technologies and talk and talk and talk, and rarely do we invest until some crisis forces us to do so.
And you would think it would be COVID-19, but that's not the case, right? So, I talked to 120 companies in my recent pandemic research, and they are not investing in networks. And I also talked to Peter Bosdorf on the ASCM model, and even though that model is all around digital networks, it doesn't tell supply chain leaders how to build them. And our networks don't interoperate. It's just like the old days when I had a Vocalec phone that couldn't connect to AT&T, that couldn't connect to an international call. So, we operate in silos, and there is no network that goes across make, source, and deliver. There's no interoperability, and there's no single sign-on. So we've got a long way to go on networks.
A lot of work to do. And big thanks to James and Rhonda and many others. We can't get to the comments just yet. We'll try to circle back. What we want to do, I want to pull up, we were just talking about supply chain planning, a big portion of this. And this is the gardening shoes we were talking about pre-show, folks. So Laura recently published a blog article that's been turning some heads. It was entitled, "How Do We Stop Buying Planning Software the Wrong Way?" So Laura, can you share just a couple of key takeaways, key points that went into this piece of your POV?
So I haven't been traveling in about 15 months. And so I sit and look out the same window, answer the same questions, and I don't do well with monotony. And I'm like, okay, enough's enough. I'm just going to answer this question for everybody about how do you buy supply chain software, because people will call me and they've been in the middle of the deal for 8 to 12 months, big teams. They didn't really decide how they were going to make a decision. And they're like, they all look the same, Laura. How do I make a decision? And I'm like, I'm not going to make a decision for you. And if they all look the same, you didn't do your job. Well, typically they'll say, well, we did an RFP, and that is your first mistake. How do you have an RFP on something you don't know? And secondly, it's all about culture and fit, and you can't put that in an RFP. I got to tell you, so many of the RFPs in the market are just horrible. They're horribly written. And second thing is they will say, well, I looked at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Now I'm an ex-Gartner analyst, and I got to tell you, you can't buy planning software off a 4-box model. There are too many elements, right? And so, both of those are failed logic. So I encourage people to, just like you buy a car, to go do a test drive, right? Get a couple of software companies, and instead of hiring these large consultants that make millions of dollars on RFPs, basically partner with some technologists, do some pilots, build a case, build your questions, run the software, and pay these technologists to run a demo for you, see if you like it, and get out of the PowerPoint buying. As an analyst, I am shocked sometimes to see people buy $10 million, $15 million software off of PowerPoint, and they'll call me and they'll ask me questions about how does this work? And I'm like, that is the wrong software for you. But, it's easy to do when you're buying off PowerPoint.
Well, you one of the things you wrap, and Greg, I'll get you weigh in here just a second, is quote, "So if you're buying software based on PowerPoint pitches, RFPs, and analyst frameworks, you are destined for disappointment, end quote. I love that. So Greg, I know you're chomping at the bit here.
Well, I mean, the foundational flaw, I think Laura described the biggest foundational flaw in an RFP, and that is the people who don't know what the solution is are writing specifications, or worse yet, they're picking a favored vendor who's going to frame the RFP to favor them to write the RFP for all of their competitors. I mean, you know, part of the RFP problem is, and I've seen it at Blue Ridge, as Laura mentioned, I've gone through dozens of RFPs. It got to the point where we didn't answer RFPs.
That's the advice I tell technologists is don't even play that ball. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, you know, walk. It's like it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of the manufacturer's time.
Yeah, and you know, part of the problem is that this is kind of typical of us in the business community. When we want a solution, we say, I want it to do X. Do you do X? Well, what if X isn't the right thing to do? Then you've completely closed the book on that culture and creativity that Laura's talking about, where a company could actually solve your problem better if you said, this is the result that I want. But that never, ever happens in an RFP. An RFP is, does it do X? Does it do Y? Does it do Z? Does it do Z fast enough? Right? Or complex enough, whatever. And, you know, that model is foundationally broken for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is that we ought to be asking for, I want this result. How do you get me there?
Well, and what's the business problem? So it was very humbling for me when I came from manufacturing to a software company, and I used vague words like visibility or planning, and I didn't really define them. And then when I was in a software company and I was having to write code with technologist or help the technologist to write code. I never wrote code myself.
I was going to say that's.
I had to learn to think hard about these definitions, and most line of business leaders haven't had that experience, and so they use vague language that isn't well defined. When really the technologists want to know what is the problem you're trying to solve, and please detail that as clearly as you can, and then let's work together to solve that together.
So I'm gonna try to use a crowbar to get into this conversation here. We got a ton of comments, but what both of y'all are soliciting. But you know, touch back on the Braves. It's like a baseball team buying software for touchdowns. The objective is all wrong, right? So let's see here. Mohib says, disruptor or disrupted, hunter or hunted. Are we not always being haunted for continuous improvement and transformation?
That's Peter, practically a poem right there.
Sorry, supply chain poem. Peter says, fine folks are all too busy tossing out fancy, snappy jargon and not delivering value. Let's see here. And Morgan Webb, great to have you with us. Appreciate your feedback that you sent to us via LinkedIn. So keep it coming, and hope y'all find all the wonderful talent you're looking for at John Galt. Peter says, get executive buy-in and move forward. I think this is Nanda here, I believe. And if it's not, Clay and Amanda, y'all let me know. He agrees, Lora Cecere. Most of the times companies end up with ERP when all they needed was good MRP software. Both of y'all want to touch on that?
Go, Laura.
Well, most software sits on the shelf. People use Excel spreadsheets. And the reason is because we're not clear on what we're buying. And often we focus on bolting the technology in, not are we getting usable technology. And we often will hire people to help us who are not necessarily incented to help us, right? They may get kickbacks on software recommendations. They may make a lot of money on RFPs. And so kind of cleanse all that, right? You know, identify your business problem, test and learn with technologists. Don't just focus on implementing technology for technology's sake. Your job's done when people use the software and drive value.
I think you have to, well, there it is. That's essentially what, so, yes. Laura has defined the two most prominent types of technology: slideware and shelfware. But I think you have to identify what the incentive is of every party you involve in an evaluation, right? I mean,
right.
If Accenture makes $100 million implementing SAP, guess what they're going to recommend, right? If they build the RFP for an ERP, guess who that's going to slant towards? I mean, it's not even intentional. Sometimes it is, but it's not even intentional. It's just subconscious and so natural. So you have to defend yourself by knowing that you are the only one with your own interest fully in mind, right?
Well,
slideware and shelfware. I love that. It's a t-shirt-ism right there, Laura.
And a lot of times consultants only have benches of large ERP software and they don't know the planning market. In the last decade, the consultants have decreased their knowledge of planning. And, you know, I sure do wish that, you know, we had a part of the money that they're paid. Yep.
Amen. Clay Luton
There's
is
got to
with
be
us.
some way, though, Laura, there has to be some way for people to get objective expertise. I mean, it can't be practical for you to go, this is the technology you should have. I bet with your knowledge, you could probably narrow it down to 2 or 3. I mean, just knowing that you could answer questions in moments that would take a consulting firm weeks or months to conceive the question for.
And I do that a lot, Greg. People send me an email on LinkedIn, you know, and I'll answer their questions. And I do the frameworks of putting together the pieces, which are like, how do you go about narrowing down to choices? And then I think it's a lot like buying a car, right? You know, you'd never buy a car without a test drive. And a lot of times it's all about, you know, how you feel in that car, what the maintenance is, if you have a local distributor, all these other factors. And most of the time people don't consider those. One of my favorite quotes is 80% is good enough. And I'm like, 80% of what, right? 80% of garbage is good enough, right? You know, it's like, you know, lots of our consultants are incented to, you know, drive the answer.
I can't tell you how many deals we lost because somebody said they picked something that was 80% of the cost and 80% of the value. And I'm like, which 80%?
Yeah, it's right? Like meaningless talk, right?
Yeah. So Chris Barnes says, sing it, sister. Watch out for those consultants who stand to make tons of money through implementing a specific solution. Excellent point there. Alay says, here comes the importance of defining the business needs clear and detailed as much as possible, and always be oriented towards technology and change along the process. And then Sylvia, I'm baffled by the way software applications are bought. I see it on the daily how software, and most importantly, CRM and logistics software, is purchased for the wrong reasons by the wrong people. Excellent point. You're nodding your head there, Laura. Please share.
It's just true. You know, and so the whole point of my article was I want to get back to gardening. I'm tired of answering the same question. It's nonsensical. You know, we've got lots of shelfware, and in the last decade, we've gone backwards on business results that supply chain leaders should be driving forward. We have 20 more days of inventory. We've elongated payables 16 days, even though, you know, we've made those payables 90 and 120 across the board. And, you know, if you look at the intersection of margin and growth, we're going backwards. And so our planning software was to help us. And how can something help us if it's shelfware?
All right. So, folks, we've been talking about this blog article, How Do We Stop Buying Planning Software the Wrong Way? You can check that out at Supply Chain Shaman, which is a wonderful and open source home for all kinds of resources, which I admire that about your approach, Laura. All right. So I'm gonna move ahead. I know that Greg and Laura, we could talk, especially with all the comments, for hours on this one topic, especially with y'all's expertise, but we're going to keep driving. I want to weigh in. We're going to change gears a bit, and we're going to talk about the ever given gift that keeps on giving to global supply chains everywhere.
See what you did there.
If you're a fan of the Griswolds, in this case, the family Griswolds, not our dear friend Mike Griswold, you might catch that line. But hey, while no longer stuck, of course, in the Suez Canal, which, by the way, costs supply chains, according to one estimate, latest estimate, $400 million by the hour across the globe. Holy cow. The Ever Given is still being detained by the Suez Canal Authority, which is seeking almost $1 billion, $916 million for salvage costs and damages. And Laura, you pinned this piece, and I love this article in Forbes, I think towards the end of March, early April. Quote, "The Ever Given is moving, but your supply chain will not." So I think a lot of bystanders, as we were talking about last week, Laura, on kind of our planning call, you know, that ship and that Suez Canal had the world's attention for those, I think, 6 or 7 days. And that's the silver lining there. It's a great thing because folks learn about logistics and transportation, these key infrastructure. But when it gets freed, it becomes a top line news story. So all the attention goes to whatever the next is. And a lot of folks don't realize that incident is still, the ripples continue to play out. So Laura, and then Greg, I'm gonna come to you, but what are some of those repercussions that you're seeing still play out by the hour?
Well, when the pandemic hit, we lost 40% of air capacity. And then air became really expensive and people started putting, private fleet into air to start moving stuff. And then we put a lot more stuff on ocean. This is the only time I've ever known where we've got so much unemployment and our imports have never been higher. And basically our ports can't handle the imports. So we're rolling freight at the port, which means that we tell you your freight's going to ship this month, but it's really going to ship next month. And we can't give predictability there. And we're shipping empty containers back to Asia off the West Coast. And we've got 30 to 40 ships any day off the coast of Long Beach. We can't get into Halifax. And Suez Canal is 13.5% of the world freight. We had almost 30 ships, either side, and then it became hundreds of ships. And then we have ships going around Africa, which is, considerably more time. So bottom line, transportation reliability has never been more variable. And our solutions were built to say that logistics is available, let's just negotiate price. Mm-hmm. And only 9% of companies actually design supply chain flows. And I think we've got to step back and say logistics is a constraint now. Everyone should be designing the flows of their supply chain, looking at that supply reliability. We need planning master data systems that look at how long does it take us for getting from point A to point X and, the variability of that. And we really need to plan for how can we improve our ability to move goods with these limitations.
I think we've taken too much of a macro view of what we traditionally call lead time, right? Which is when the goods are in transit. A big portion of that is on transportation. And you have to look at the handoffs and the modes and the methods of the modes, because now ships are sailing through more dangerous waters to try and have a more direct route. So that increases risk. And rather than having a risk over a 30, 60, 90-day lead time, you have to look at the risk over this small segment that's going through the Suez Canal, or this segment that's going across the North Sea, right? Or this segment where they're going through typhoons on the way, to Japan or China or whatever, rather than the traditional route, which was more southerly or more northerly. So when you see those kind of things happening, you have to evaluate their risk in terms of their segment, not in terms of the macro, because then you blend it out, right? 1 foot's in frozen water, one foot's in ice, and 1 foot's in boiling water. On average, you're good, warm, whatever.
Well, so you lay out. You lay out.
Keep
5.
going, Greg.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. Keep digging.
So Laura, you lay out 5 items in particular in this very practical Forbes piece, and one of those, I like this, what you kind of wrapped on. Quote, give logistics leaders a seat at the table. Often logistics teams operate out of a trailer in the parking lot of major corporations. Traditionally, logistics was a cost to be managed, with many companies outsourcing shipping and downsizing their logistics organizations, end quote. Greg, I know in particular, the way you describe when you're in retail, the supply chain folks or logistics folks, that resonates with you, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, when I was in what we called the purchasing or merchandising department, I just cast off POs and they went into these dark rooms with these weird people we called expediters. I don't know how they got on a ship or a truck or a train or a plane, and I didn't care. I just cut a PO and I said, it better be here on time. And that was the amount, that was the extent of our internal collaboration until something was late or looked like it was going to be late. And then I might open that door to that dark room and say, where's my shipment? So we have to be much more engaged than that, obviously. And companies have been more engaged than that, certainly. But I think there is still a tremendous amount of opportunity to not only be engaged when the transaction is occurring, but when you're selecting the vendors that you buy the product from, the vendors that you ship the goods with, the vendors that produce it for you, and to understand the implications and costs and risks there.
So, Laura, I'm going to give you the final word because we still got to cover Project Zebra, which we're excited about. So, Laura, give us one final word on this article.
I think logistics is very different than what we've seen in the past 3 decades. Higher constraints, greater variability, and the systems we've built are not adequate, and we've got to redesign logistics from the outside in. All of this telematics, AIS data, visualization, drone data is available, but it's at the doorstep of the organization because people don't know how to use it. And you know, great opportunity to redefine logistics. We've got a lot of telematics companies that are flying high right now in life because they're basically showing you signals. But I'm like, don't just show me signals, right? Bring it home. Let's bring it home into the applications. Let's redefine transportation planning. So it's just not one mode. It's just not one continent. It's just not all about orders. And it's a great opportunity.
Well said. Okay, I'm going to share a couple comments, and then we're going to tackle Project Zebra, which is pretty cool. Sneha, hey, Sneha, how are you doing? Great to have you here today. She says proactive and instant communication is key when dealing with vendors. Great point there. Jenny says, Lora Cecere made me feel so old with all those companies that are no longer around.
Jenny, I am old. What can I was
going to say, Jenny, just imagine we worked with all those companies, so just feel better about that.
That's right. Mohib, that's a very expensive backhaul for those empty containers. Agreed.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Myra, great to have you here on the live stream. I think I saw you on social media earlier. She says, too often I see companies look for software to solve business process issues. Good people, good process, and then add technology. It's a mix that doesn't always work. Okay, so as we start to wind things down here, Laura, we just got so much we want to get your take on. And we blink and it's almost the top of the hour. So this Project Zebra, this is a very interesting. And first, if you could tell us, why did you name it Project Zebra?
Well, Project Zebra is to define outside-in processes. Our current processes are inside-out. They're based upon historic data, and we're just surrounded by all this market data. And so what if we could plan market to market with bidirectional orchestration and use all the sensor data and use all this point of sale data and use all the consumption data and build outside-in processes? And you know, I feel like a broken record. For 2 decades, I've been talking about outside-in processes. So in January, I went to all the technology companies that I cover and said, I want to get serious about outside-in processes. I think we should build a definition of outside-in processes and help people with how can they use unstructured data, how can they use telematics data, how can they use point-of-sale data, and how can we drive processes outside in. And everybody else is like, yeah, Laura, you just don't understand my software. We do it already. And I'm like, yeah, I do understand your software, and you don't do it already. And so 09 said, well, Laura, let's do it. And so we called up ASCM, we called up 4 educators, we called up 12 business leaders, and we started a council. And we're starting open source models, and we'll release that at the ASCM conference in June, where we're looking at how do we build outside-in models. And I'm excited that we're doing this work.
So, Laura, so ASCM is on board with open source results, right?
That's right.
That's wonderful.
And so I actually have made a suggestion about how to redefine the score model so that we can actually look at what an outside-in process looks like and try to help people with how to use consumption data, how to use weather data, event data telematics data, unstructured text data, and to use data that comes in at all speeds and redefine planning. The other thing that is really important to me is we had an assumption that we could have planning engines that could be used by planners with about 2 years of experience, and that those people could influence the rest of the organization. And that's just not a real assumption. And so I want to make planning available for the masses. I want it to be available on the chief operating officer's desks. Again, the marketing team and the sales team. I want to align outside in and put planning and decision support and redefine decision support everywhere.
You know what, I love all of that, but what I love most is you want to give the power to the people and
Yes.
not block it behind a gate or behind a membership or behind some big hefty event fee. You're contributing to the industry and you're helping, whether you're, chief supply chain officer and you've seen it and been there and done that, or if you're, in the first year of your time planning or doing anything in supply chain, you've got this resource that you can gain from this, this new type of thinking and doing. So I love that, Lora. I love, that's a big part of this Project Zebra. And I love the backstory, because I didn't realize, Greg, did you know that zebras can change their stripes? So Lora, what did you uncover there?
So Project Zebra, the analogy is that traditional supply chains can't change their stripes, so to speak. They're kind of caught in tradition. But, the zoologists thought that zebras couldn't change their stripes, but they studied the zebras in Africa, and Jenny, you can probably relate to this, and they found that zebras can change their stripes when they go to different habitat. And so our goal is to help zebras everywhere, which are supply chain leaders, to change their stripes, to be outside in, and to do a step change from their current thinking to drive value. And this is real important to me because this industry's stuck and I want to unstick it.
Love that. And looking forward. So one final thing. So Project Zebra, you kind of touched on, we didn't dive in deep with the network of networks, but all of it kind of comes together. You've got an event coming up in September, and we hope to collaborate with you to get that all that thought leadership out. But tell folks about the event in September.
So I speak at a lot of events, and it really drives me nuts that we've got a lot of event companies that put on horrible events, right? And, the recipe for a disastrous event is I have a big sponsorship, and then I let the vendor get on stage and really take over the program. So not with Lora's event. Lora handpicks all of her speakers, and it's based on the Supply Chains to Admire that we're going to launch in June this year. It's our 9th anniversary of doing the Supply Chains to Admire. And I look for people that have really driven business results, and then I ask them to speak about their stories. And I look for changing business models and how people have been successful in supply chain and using supply chain to really leverage their business models and stories of leadership. And it'll be in Franklin, Tennessee, and it'll be in September 7th through the 9th. And we will be having about 90 to 100 people in a COVID-friendly environment, and we'll also live cast it around the world. And I'm hoping that Scott and Greg are my moderators. And so people like Jenny, I'm hoping, are grooving in South Africa on the Supply Chain Insights Global Summit.
Awesome. There's so much to be excited for,
Yeah.
Lora. So Greg, I'm gonna get you to respond before we kind of wrap, but Lora Cecere.
I just thought honestly, all I can
thinking
think about
zebras,
is
aren't you?
What's that?
You're still thinking zebras, aren't you?
No, I'm thinking of what a service that is. I'm also thinking how I can utilize it to start a company, and that it's time for it really is time for companies to acknowledge their shortcomings. And Laura, we've talked about this briefly, but best practice in supply chain is often a cover for bad practice that we've been doing for so many years that we're giving it cover. And we need to rethink how we're attacking some of the problems of supply chain. Outside in applies, in my opinion, to many things. Forecasting is not the least of which. All of those indicators that Lora spoke to could have given us indications of things that we missed by miles pre and post pandemic. So, Yeah, it's an incredibly valuable service. And honestly, Laura, I know we've talked about this before, but I didn't really get it till right this moment. So that is really, really powerful, a great service to the community. Yeah, and I'm interested in how that could really change how we attack supply chain, preempt, frankly, a lot of supply chain problems.
Agreed.
So if I'm successful, it'll be like Apache, where it'll be open source network. It'll become kind of a community of technologists that are building these open source models.
Yeah.
And that we will change the SCORE model to be outside in to help people everywhere use all these signals that are coming to our doorstep. And that will make our current technologies obsolete. And then I'll retire.
Well, hey, we can't.
Well, we'll be happy to carry the mantle forward for you, and I hope you get to do that really soon.
No, we can't. We can't let
Get
Laura.
to Savannah.
You got too much goodness to offer
Thank you.
the industry, for sure. And we see it here now that we've established. We love having you once a month. We take you once a week, but I know you got a bunch of things cooking.
Yeah.
And I want to share a couple of some feedback from what we're getting here. So Evelyn, hope this finds you well. Great to have you here as part of the live stream. Servant leadership, excellent. Amen. Sylvia,
thank you.
As a global logistics veteran, 40 years and counting, yes, we earn a seat at the head of the dinner table. Sylvia, I'm with you there. Morgan, really great insights today. Jenny says, zebra, tomato, we're there, she says. Big show, Bob Bova. Laura, great guest. Your perspectives why many of solution providers like us can get so frustrated to the same as it ever was mindset. Excellent.
Little talking heads moment there.
That's
same
right.
As it ever was.
Mohib, SCORE with logistic regression model. Very excited. Very excited. And then finally, Sneha says, planning is such a key function, almost a lifeline of any operations. Always a pleasure listening to you, Laura. We know, Sneha, a great point. But Greg and Laura, as much as I enjoy listening to what Laura has to say, we're about action, deeds, not words. And Laura's doing it. And I can't tell you, you're bringing change to an industry that's got to have it. And the pandemic, and then, the keep coming, which illustrate why we can't act like it's 1982 anymore. Not to pick on that year, but you insert whatever year. And, the industry has to change, and it's going to take leaders to do it. And I appreciate what you're doing there, Laura. We're very honored to collaborate with you. So, folks, if you want to get goodness on a regular basis, Supply Chain Shaman is the best .com is the best place to go. Laura, is that right?
Thank you. Yeah, it's the blog that I write on every week. And if people want to follow me on Forbes, they can do that as well. And I've just started a new podcast on supply chain leaders. I have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring. So what I'm doing is I'm interviewing people about what was leadership and what made it work and what advice do you have for others for their careers. And I'm excited about this series because I'm just finding great insights.
What do you call it, Laura?
It's Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights.
Love it. A lot of goodness there. Well, hey, Laura, big thanks. I really appreciate you spending the last hour and some change with us. Always a pleasure, and we look forward to reconnecting with you again really soon. Lora Cecere, founder of Supply Chain Insights, author of the popular blog Supply Chain Shaman, and new podcaster. You said Straight Talk, right? Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. It's actually about 350 podcasts out there. I'm not as high tech as you guys, but I've been doing it for a while, and this is a new series on leadership. So I'm interviewing someone that's either been in the industry 20 to 30 years and getting ready to transition. And I'm asking him questions like I just interviewed Rick Davis on influence management. Rick went through 28 years of turmoil at Kellogg. And how did he influence the organization, and how did he maintain, his own person in that old transition? And then next week, I'm interviewing Jane, who leads manufacturing for Bayer around, dealing with diversity and, really building diverse. And her question is, how do we drive innovation in the manufacturing world where we're really focused on standardization? What's the balance between innovation and standardization? So I think that's going to be a great topic.
Yeah.
It all sounds wonderful to me. Laura, thanks so much. And we look forward to reconnecting with you again really soon.
Does that mean I get swooshed out?
Yes, here it comes.
Okay.
There's so much more I wanted to bounce off of her, including the Girl Scout cookies conversation we had just before we went live. You know, we're going to have to make that the supply chain behind the Girl Scout cookies an episode. A lot of folks may not know that Laura led and volunteered her time to the Girl Scouts for years. And in fact, she was telling us, as Greg just ventured to Savannah recently, Laura talked about how she'd go there once a year. And because, you know, the Girl Scout, is it tribes or Girl Scout, whatever the small classes are, well, there's not a lot of funding for that stuff. And so Laura was talking about how when they went down there once a year, they'd have one really nice meal, seafood, but a lot of peanut butter sandwiches to get around the budgetary constraints. And I love that.
You know what? In Savannah, even peanut butter sandwiches taste really, really good.
That's right. Well, hey, Greg, man, I know we're a few minutes over and really appreciate everybody, all the comments we got. And I know we couldn't get to all of them, and I know we couldn't get to some of the questions, but there was so much we wanted to bounce off of Laura here today. Big things happening. But Greg, what was your, out of all of what we tackled with the one and only Lora Cecere, what was your favorite aspect of the conversation?
Well, I don't know if favorite's the right word, but most impactful was that Laura had, and I have realized this over the year, Laura has been encouraging, chiding, browbeating the supply chain industry to advance for now decades, and we continue to resist, apparently, and that's disappointing in it, and particularly now that we have seen as bad as it can get. We're seeing, frankly, as bad as it can get. I think it's time for executives in supply chain, for people on the shop floor, the dock, in front of the planning screen, whatever, and people outside of supply chain as well, to recognize the value of what she's talking about and to start to seriously employ it. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, it will be costly, but it will not cost you your brand equity. It will not cost you your ability to deliver to your customer. It will not cost you, incredible financial risk, like it continuing to ignore it obviously has and will in great measure. So it's time to change supply chain.
Love that. I love that. And troops, Girl Scout troops. Thank you for correcting me, Lisa Holden. Bob Bova says, I may have to give up my Big Show title to Laura. She really crystallizes the mindset that holds companies back.
Yeah,
I agree. All right, so we got to leave it there. And well, Nick Rumor, you jumped in late. Hey, we were talking about your podcast guest gig earlier on the front end of the show for This Week in Business History. Y'all check that out. You'll probably love his Dundee, Scotland accent a lot better than my South Carolina dialect. I love the story. So Nick, great storytelling there. Okay, everybody. On behalf of our entire team here, big thanks to Lora Cecere for joining us. Y'all can see just with each and every appearance why we're some of her biggest fans. Big thanks to, of course, Greg back in the studio, back in the saddle. We look forward to getting lots of picks from the Charleston and Savannah swing. Big thanks, of course, OpenText for making it happen. Big thanks to Amanda and Clay and Natalie, all behind the scenes to help us engage all these wonderful participants. And on behalf of the whole team, Scott Luton signing off for now. Hey, just like Greg and Laura's talking about, it's about doing good. It's about giving forward, and it's about being the change. And whatever that means to you, jump on it. It's Monday. It's a brand new week. Let's make it happen. Y'all have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.